being of foreigners, not being able to understand how an African could live over half of the time span of human history and build societies, not only without a jail, but without a word in that language that meant jail. Built a family structure so well designed, they didn't need a civil court, because courts were built into the family structure and into the village structure and into the community structure. The family concept, the kinship concept, was developed to the point where hunger was eliminated. Prostitution was a thought that never crossed anyone's mind. Divorce wasn't a part of their vocabulary. These foreigners, fakers, fools, and missionaries could not stand to see this. And so the first assault was on the way of life, was on that structure of the way of life. Now, all history is a current event. Everything that ever happened is continuing to happen. The first child that threw a pebble in the ocean is still influencing the flow of that ocean, be it ever so minuscule, and will for all times to come. The first man that sneezed is still influencing the atmosphere. I was walking down Lenox Avenue in Harlem, and two hip cats met. And I swear that was the finest philosophy I have encountered. And one said to the other, "How things with you, man?" He said, "Everything is everything." So I will proceed with the concept that everything is everything. That there's an interconnection with all events on earth, and no one is outside, and there is no insignificance. The insignificance is significance in its insignificance. I'm saying that the African had a holistic look at the world. Now I'm talking about Africa in transition, and I'm talking about what set the transition in motion. Africa was in positive transition, as everybody else is, but what set in motion the negative transition that brought us to the sorry state where we are today, where there is not one African state in all Africa. There is not one African head of state who would publicly pray to an African God. There is not an organized African spirituality on any statewide basis. And no one quotes African philosophy as though Africans were people who didn't think. And we have forgotten that he was the original thinker, that he emerged in the world when there was no Europe, there was no Asia, there was no books, and he created the basis of all of these things. And what I'm trying to say is that the great trouble among African people has been the negative transition brought on by invaders, and that these invaders, with disdain for Africa's way of life, have been disruptors to the point where Africans had a hard time getting back to their original way of life. And then when the African leaves home and is trained in the schools of foreigners, he comes home with a negative attitude toward his original way of life. His food is no longer good enough for him. The African is accustomed to eating from the fields. He's not accustomed to canned food. He comes home now, he wants French bread, a German car, and a foreign woman. He's not an African anymore. He is a foreigner and he's an intruder, and many times some of these educated Africans are as much an enemy of Africa as a white invader. Out of Africa, too many times, the wrong turn of faith has called our sons and miseducated them and sent them back into Africa as the enemies of Africa. If you're going to understand Africa in transition, you have to understand the first visitors to Africa from Western Asia, a motley crew led by a man named Abraham. And when those visitors, when Africa was invaded from the same area from whence came the visitors did not join the Africans who had been that benefactor. The visitors joined the invaders and became wheeler dealers, clerks around the invaders. And there, because Africans who befriend other people didn't have the favor returned. This is the beginning of the negative transition in Africa, because Africa began to be bastardized physically, bastardized politically, bastardized culturally. A question was asked of me in a lecture in Canada. A girl stood up. She seemed nice enough, but rather sad. She was kind of the light brigade, and she complained. She said that my father was black and my mother was white, and what's going to happen to me? I don't seem to fit any place. And I remember an example that Malcolm X gave once. He said, if you take a clean glass of water and put 3 drops of ink in it, you can't use it as ink, you can't drink it as water. You have to pour it out. So these negative invaders have created some entities that we don't know what to do with, because they're not too pleased among us, and their fathers are not opening the door for them. What I'm saying is these foreigners coming into Africa have fastened a problem on us that we previously didn't have to deal with. The problem